Hello, everyone, and welcome to Real Estate Right Now, where we talk about real estate matters that matter to you. And I'm telling you about today's show is a show of great interest to everybody. Here it is. You know what? People ask regularly, I'm thinking about getting a place in the mountains. Yeah, the crisp, clean air, smell the beauty of it all, see the wildlife. And I got to tell you something, there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, my wife and I were just in the mountains last weekend and with some friends, and it's a very cool experience. But what is it like to buy and sell a home in the mountains? I mean, if you were going to buy a home in the mountains, there's probably some things you should know. Well, thankfully, I've got my expert here. His name's Scott Thompson. He is a buyer's expert specialist with Linda Craft Team Realtors. And Scott has never been with us. So Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So Scott, you, before the show, we talked and you've said to me that you spent half your life living in the mountains.
I did. Moved there with my mother and stepfather, and when I was in middle school, and kind of grew up there and lived there off and on as an adult.
So, okay. So a lot of people, there's three types of people, and we talked about this before the show. There's people who want to live there permanently.
Yep.
There's people who want to invest. And then there are people who want kind of a second home. Yeah. Okay. So you've kind of dealt with all three because you've also bought and sold as a real estate professional in the mountains as well.
Yes,
so
correct.
You've dealt with this before. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the person who wants to live there first.
Right.
Okay. If you're going to make the move and say, okay, I'm going to move to the mountains, all right, and you're going to purchase a home, a mountain home, what is some of the first things that you find are different when you do buy a mountain home versus if you're buying a home in the city or the town?
Right. Well, the first thing I would say is, where in the mountains do you want to be? There's a lot of different factors that can feed into that. But, one thing that people don't think about is there's a lot of homes, unless they're newer in the mountains, that don't have HCAV or AC. Sorry. There's no air conditioning. If you're above, 3,000 feet, right, 3,500 feet, people don't have AC.
Oh.
They don't, and a lot of them were summer homes to begin with. So there was no need for it. And, when the sun goes down in the evening, you open the windows, cools off immediately.
Right.
Good to go. So little features like that are a big one. A lot of the homes have basements, which we don't see a lot here.
Okay.
So you have to worry about that. Are they, if it's a newer home, again, not so much of a worry, but a lot of the older homes, is that dried in well, is it sealed well, those kind of things. What's the drive like to get to the property?
Right.
If you're going to be living there year round, are you going to be able to get in and out okay?
Right. Because the weather becomes an issue.
Weather becomes an issue. You get snow. It's not that bad. It's not like, up north or something, but, depending on where you're at in the mountains, you can get quite a bit. Typically you get small snows and they're gone in a few days, most of the time, but you can get deeper ones. You can get bigger ones. They can stick around a little bit. And then just, wet weather, mud, that kind of thing. So you want to be, kind of take that into account where you're going to be, how close do you want to be to other things? Just like you would here, what's your commute? If you're going to live there permanently, where you need to, get to for work, that kind of thing. Grocery stores aren't going to be as common. So, where are your amenities and how far away from those are you willing to be? So, there's a lot of really nice little small towns that are quaint and everybody loves those, but you may not have a really nice grocery store for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So you just got to take those things into account.
Well, I think that's really interesting because, when we were out there in the mountains, we were like to the closest grocery store. I think it was like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Because we were outside of.
It's pretty typical.
We were outside of Boone, North Carolina.
Yeah.
It was about 20 minutes, but it's not a 20-minute straight drive.
No.
It's a winding road.
Yeah.
And you're going about 20 miles an hour. And if there's any sort of precipitation on that road, you're going slower. It's not always an easy drive.
Yeah. If you're not used to the curves, that takes some time too, for sure. A lot of people really feel uncomfortable on those windy mountain roads. There's a drop off on one side, sharp curves,
right?
People tend to go a little slow. And you get, looky-loos that, are going slow because they're checking out the view,
right,
that kind of thing. But you have to take that into account. You may have a grocery store, but you may not have other things. Target,
right?
Big, the big box stores, things like that you want to have close by. Those may be further away.
So, we live in North Carolina,
mm-hmm.
and so you were in the Asheville area, Boone area,
mm-hmm.
which are bigger mountain towns.
Mm-hmm.
that have most of those amenities
Mhm.
available to you. I mean, like, the stores and the
Mhm.
bigger stores and that type of thing. But that's not always the case.
Not at all.
And I guess it comes down to how important is that to you?
Right. One of the things that's changed in the last few years everywhere is people being able to work from home more. So having high speed internet, that's another thing that could factor in.
Mhm.
Some of those really outlying areas, it's starting to change now, but some of those outlying areas that are really far out, you might not have really good internet. So that could be a mitigating factor. If they do have really good internet, there's some spots where they were ahead of the game and saw this coming kind of, and you might be totally fine. You may be okay not being near the stores or grocery stores or things like that because you can do everything from home. You just make sure you don't forget anything when you do go,
Right, right.
because you don't want to go back out. But there's a little town called Hot Springs. You ever heard of Hot
No, I
Springs?
have not.
Hot Springs is kind of north and a little bit west of Asheville, right on the Appalachian Trail. It's a little teeny artsy kind of town. It's really cool, but there's not much of anything there. The
Mm.
French Broad River runs through there, the Appalachian Trail, a lot of outdoor stuff, but that's about it. So that's one of those locations that, if you were going to try to work remotely from home, you may not get the good internet there, and it might be a problem.
Well, that brings up a great point, because one of the things that we ran into was we had no cell service.
Oh, that happens a lot too. Yeah.
So there happened to be great internet in the home we
Mhm.
were staying in. And so we had to make sure our cell phones were connected to the
That's a
internet.
really good point. There's, just like anywhere, there's certain carriers that are slightly better. So you'll want to research that, find out what carrier really covers that area better than the others. But you definitely can have dead spots. When I was working in real estate up there, in fact, I had a Garmin GPS in my vehicle for mapping because you couldn't rely on your cell
Cell
phone.
phone, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had to have an actual Garmin with downloaded maps and everything, because it was a couple times that I ended up, end of the day, the sun's going down, it's raining, and yeah, I knew the mountains really well. There was still a couple times that I was like, where am I?
Right,
You know,
right.
so you
Yeah.
know, it- that's definitely a good thing to bring up. That's a very big thing to consider is, will you have cell service? Will you have internet service? Those kind of minis that we're so used to now.
Right.
You may run into that there.
Okay. So this then leads me into another thought as I was thinking about this whole thing. Is there a difference now that you've done real estate in the
Mhm.
mountains and you've done real estate here in the city, Raleigh, which has got a cumulative about 1 million people in our area? Is there a difference in purchasing a home
Mhm.
when I mean, I know the contracts are generally the same, but is there some unique differences when you come to buying?
Little bit. It's not huge. I would say that things run on mountain time. You ever heard of that
No,
saying? Like,
I've
people
not.
say that about the islands,
Right.
the Caribbean things.
Right.
Mountain time is similar. Things move a little slower.
Okay.
Most likely, you're not gonna find a home, go under contract, and close in 30 days.
Okay.
It's going to be a little longer. By the time they get the inspector out, get people out to do the different inspections, you get all that stuff happening. Those guys move at their own pace, and they don't typically like to be rushed a lot of times. Contractors, anybody like that. So the process may take a little longer.
Okay.
That's one for sure. Um, you know, the rest is state by state. So it's
Right.
all the contract is the same. All that is basically the same. You know, you need to look for some different things. We deal with radon here. You deal with radon there.
Okay.
It's in pockets. There's some areas that are more known for it than others, but that's one of those things you'll look into. Again, the type of structures, unless you're in one of the more developed areas, you're typically not going to see big developments like we have here.
Right.
It's going to be homes, single built on a few acres or what have you. So you're not in an HOA typically. I mean, although they do exist, of course. But when you're out, kind of more out in the boonies, you're going to run into less of that.
Okay, let's talk about the inspection process,
Sure.
because I got to believe that the inspection process is a little different, because there's other considerations maybe that we have to consider in the inspection process that maybe we're not thinking of here. What might be some of those things in the inspection process that we want to
Not a
do?
whole lot, although, again, there's moisture mitigation is probably the biggest one. And we run into that here. But there, when things can be all funneled down into, when you're on a slope if the water isn't mitigated away from the house really well, you can have some damage there. It is wet, depending on where in the mountains you are. Those are some really wet regions. There's a section of Transylvania and Jackson County that is only a few inches away annually from being a deciduous rainforest.
Mm,
So it's very wet, a
right.
lot of moisture in crawl spaces and that sort of thing. So, the same things we'd look for here, just a little bit different, and maybe some areas where you want to focus a little more attention.
Well, and I would think too, correct me if I'm wrong here, but when you're in those individual homes in the mountains, you're also dealing with well and septic, right? Versus,
Typically, yes.
right?
That is a good point. When you're not in one of the areas that's more developed, you're going to run into, or anytime you're out of a city, basically, you're going to run into the well and septic as opposed to sewer. We don't typically see as much of the community wells or community sewers like you would here. So that's a very valid point. It's going to be septic.
Which means you're going to have a separate inspection.
Typically, although they don't always do it as much up there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It just is a different kind of approach. It's a good idea, and your agent should and will most likely recommend it like you would anywhere. It just doesn't happen quite as much as here. Here, it's almost automatic that we get a survey, septic, all those things,
Right.
and you should do those things, of course. It may not be as common up in the mountains.
So, what I'm thinking is you had a story where you had a septic issue.
I did. It was actually just a sewer line in the downstairs of a house it was my first purchase, and we used it as a rental. And my wife and I also used part of the basement that we had sectioned off as our long-term storage. And unfortunately, there was a rupture in the line that we had to deal with. It was pretty bad.
So now, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus here. That's not
Right,
my
right.
job here. But would there? I mean, was it something that could have been seen on an inspection? Was it something that? I mean, how could that have been avoided?
Well, so a couple things. It's an older home, and it was old piping that probably was due to be replaced. But mostly it was really due to the renters we had in there that probably knew there was a slow leak that they didn't report.
Okay.
So that's really more the issue. When we were getting ready to put it on the market to sell is when we discovered it
Got
and
it.
thought, oh, we need to take care of this,
Right.
obviously.
Right.
And it was old copper piping.
Oh, got it.
So yeah, we had that taken care of.
Yeah, I guess that the piping thing reminds me too of, because it gets typically a little colder than we get here.
Yes.
That your piping can freeze.
Definitely you're going to have more chance of freezing lines, and you got to make sure you're taking care of that. One of the other things is heating and cooling in the mountains is going to be different potentially. You will, in a lot of those older homes, you can run into old oil furnaces, which we do see some here, but that typically not in town. And the big one is you got to make sure that tank isn't buried in the yard.
Mm,
If it's a buried tank, you want to be really careful about that. That's something that does come up on occasion, especially out in the boonies. And a lot of the older homes that are out in the side of a mountain somewhere, especially at a higher elevation, may not have air conditioning. They're,
right.
so you want to be really aware of that. Is it going back to the water? There are a few, it's pretty rare these days, but there are a few that are still spring fed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so that's a whole different issue, and it's really you're going to have a hard time with a lender on that. You typically have to do some special stuff there.
Well, that's good. That's good
But
information.
there are some on it. If you look at it like an old farmstead, for instance. You're looking at some older property like that. You could run into that where there's a spring house and an old spring.
Okay. So let's talk about pricing
Mhm.
in the mountains. I know, again, you've lived in different places out in the mountains here. Is there, I mean, are we seeing, you paying attention to what the pricing is there? Has
Mhm.
has that changed a great
It
deal?
has. I mean, it's just like anywhere. It's location, location, location. If you want to be, close into Boone, Asheville, any of those locations, it's going to be a little pricier. If you want to have a view, you're going to pay a premium for a view. If you want to have live water, those are the features that people are looking for up in the mountains. We always used to joke that everybody comes to the mountains and they want 3,500 foot elevation with a 360-degree view and a waterfall on the same property. I'm like, well, you can't really have the view and the waterfall. They don't
Right.
really go together. But people are looking for all those things. They want to check all the boxes. And so that's really where the price change can happen. Is it in a really great location? Is it, you can save a little money if you're creative. For instance, my stepfather built a home. He bought a lot for a really good price because there was a creek at the front of the lot that was in this big ravine. He had some forethought and creativity and saw that he could turn that into something and made it a feature. Did a dam with a waterway, and it's a water feature when you drive into the property. So, but he was able to purchase that lot for cheaper because of that. So it all is going to vary more on that kind of thing. The big one is most people want to have a sunrise or sunset view, or they want to have active water. Those are the two big ones.
So here's a question then too that comes up is that, let's say it doesn't have a view.
Right.
Is there rules and regulations about maybe clearing?
Yes, it's a good one. Not so much about clearing, but in most of the areas, there are regulations and rules about how close to the ridge line you can build, because they don't want to ruin the view for everybody. So if everybody built right at the tippy top, it kind of ruins the view for everyone. So there are a lot of rules about that where you're not able to build at a certain point above that, going up to the ridge line.
Now, I think we have some rules here in the city that, you can't, sometimes you can't clear out trees
Yes.
here.
Yes.
Do they have similar types of things like you can, like
Some,
impervious soil issues or those types
well,
of
it's more typically that's gonna be more HOA issue, just like it would be
Okay.
here. Now the state has regulations, and I think those probably are pretty similar across the state, but
Okay.
I'm not positive on that. I
Okay.
wouldn't be the expert. But you do have to be careful with erosion, of course. If you're clearing
Right.
a lot,
Right.
you have to, you're required to do certain things, or the contractor is required to do certain things to mitigate any kind of serious erosion downstream for
Yeah.
water quality.
Yeah, see, these are the things I don't think people are thinking about. They're thinking about, okay, you know what? I found the perfect spot in the mountains. I'm just going to clear all these
Yeah,
trees out,
yeah.
right? I'm going to create my own view, right?
Right.
I'm going to creatively create my own view. But it's not what you think. You just can't take out the trees.
Not typically. I mean, you can to some degree if they're on your land, if you're on your property, obviously. But most people, we encourage, and most people do, is they top trees or, get a little more creative with that. So you can get a view, or at least a partial view, but you don't want to ruin it for everyone, or then there's no point in having the mountains or going to the mountains, because then it becomes just like everywhere else.
Okay, so we've talked about the buyer side. What about the selling side? Because you've done that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is there differences, when you're trying to sell a house in the mountains versus trying to sell a house in the city?
It's a good question. I think, it's some of the same things we've talked about from the buyer side. You take those into account. Am I in a location that's going to be desirable? Just like you would anywhere. What are the factors, that are going to impact us listing this, and the price point? It's just a little bit different factors that are going to, impact where your price point is. I mean, if you have a great view and you're 20 minutes to town, but you're kind of private and quiet, then you're talking about a kind of a premium price. Whereas if you're on a small lot that doesn't have a view, that's back in a cove that's shaded, and it stays cold and damp all the time, probably not as premium of a price on that lot or that property.
So I guess I'm thinking too now that when you go into the buying
Mm-hmm.
portion of that, you need to think about selling, right? Because you may have thought, okay, this is the perfect spot for me, but
Is it for everyone?
Is it sellable,
Mhm.
right? Because you bought it for your purposes,
Mhm.
and I don't know this. Maybe you have the stats since you were a real estate professional over there, but typically the average person stays in their house 4.2 years or so. I know that slides a little bit.
Mm.
Is that standard there? Is it a longer?
I think it's probably pretty standard, other than you have a little bit more of the mix of the vacation home. We have a lot of folks that split their time. The town that I grew up in particular, you get a lot of people that come up for the summer from Florida, go back in the winter to Florida, from the town of Brevard. So they go from Brevard County, Florida, to the town of Brevard, North Carolina. They love that. So that is one thing you see a lot of, and so it's not as impactful now as it was years ago. When I was young in that town, wintertime was just the local folk. The businesses didn't open as much. You weren't open all week long. They might close on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. That's changed a little bit now. But that's a big mitigating factor as well. Is it a vacation rental? Is it full-time residence? Is it something you're just going to use part-time? Those kind of things.
Yeah, let's talk about the vacation. Let's move into the vacation
Sure.
home, because what considerations should people make if you're going to purchase a vacation home? Is it the same as if you're going to live there full time, or do you maybe have a different consideration
Yeah,
since you're
yeah.
only there part time?
I would say if you're going to be the only user of that property, then it's just really, what is your motivation? Why do you want to be in the mountains? If you're going to rent it when you're not using it, and obviously, that's a different thing, and you'd want to be in an area that you think other people would want to come to. If you're just using it for your own purposes, and again, why are you there? Is it that you want to hike and do outdoor things? Is it that you want to be near the beer scene in Asheville? Is it you want to be near ski resorts such as Wolf Laurel or Beach Mountain? Is it one of the schools? You have kids going to Western Carolina or App State, and you want to be in Boone or Cullowhee. Those are the factors that would come in there. If you want to be into the hiking and mountain biking and whitewater kayaking and rafting, then that's going to be what's going to determine kind of where you're at. And again, I can use my little hometown as a good reference point. Brevard has access to the biggest section of trails in the Pisgah National Forest.
Mm.
There's also 2 state parks and a third one coming there. So it's a great location for hiking, biking, all those kinds of things, but it may not be the best place for some of those other things. So it's kind of what is your reason for going to the mountains?
Yeah, this starts to get a little complicated
Mhm.
because I'm like going, okay, because I'm always thinking about selling, when I'm buying, right? I'm thinking
Yeah,
about, okay,
yeah.
is this going to be a sellable property? And I know that selfishly we go, well, I'm going to go there because I'm going to do all those activities that I want to do. I want to camp, I want to hike, I want to UTV, I want to ride the horses and
Yeah.
Vilas, right? And do whatever. But you have to consider the sell side, I think, here
Yes.
too, right?
Yes. I mean, you can kind of try to find that happy medium like you would somewhere else. It's just different factors. So if you want to find that happy medium, maybe you want to be within 30, 40 minutes to one of the larger towns or cities, such as Asheville, Boone, someplace like that. But maybe in an area that's also only 30 or 40 minutes to one of the big national forests or the Smoky Mountain National Park if you go further west. The things like that. Yeah, usually what you want to factor in and try to be in a kind of a central location to multiple things.
And in doing so, chances are your prices are going to go up a little
Yes.
bit, right? Because
Yes, most likely.
the more convenience that you have,
Absolutely.
you're probably going to pay more of a premium.
And for some people, this may be important. For others, it won't. But there are still some counties in the far western part of the state that are dry counties. So that's another factor people might want to factor in. Some people might. If you get way over near the Smoky Mountain National Park, Bryson City, that area, Graham County, some of those areas, they're dry.
Wow.
It's the old mountain towns.
Well, and which goes against the grain of thinking, well, you think of mountain towns, you think, well, there must be moonshine in the mountains.
Well, there is, but that's not in the town.
Right.
That's out in the cove.
Okay, renting real quick.
Right.
I'm going to buy a house as a rental. Considerations that you might want somebody to know if they're going to purchase something for as a rental.
For long-term rental, obviously you probably want to be somewhere where people can get close to a job or work. For vacation rental, it's all those same things we've talked about. You want to ideally be where you're close to attractions of some kind, something that people are going to want to do and see. You've got lots of different options with that. Almost every one of those little teeny mountain towns has something fun going on.
Right.
They're close to something. They're close to a section of one of the national forests. They're close to a river that can be kayaked or paddled in some way. They're near hiking trails, wineries, anything of that nature. You just kind of pick what you think would be a good marketing, for you and what you want to do, and go with that. Find the thing that fits your lifestyle, but you think also could be good for other people and people would be interested in. Um, Being close to places where there's wedding venues is a big one.
Really?
A lot of people do that. Yeah, because a lot of people go, just like here, you might go out in the country or to the beach. People go to the mountains to do their wedding.
Right.
So some of these places where there's some little old chapel back in a cove that's real cute. Sometimes it's something as little as that, but you just find that thing that's unique to that area that you think could attract people and bring them in, and you go for that. And you got to kind of weigh that out. Look at the demographics. Look at what kind of, every county is going to have information on what their tourism looks like and how many people are coming in. So that's a good resource to utilize.
Yeah, I know we're running out of time here, but we didn't even talk about skiing.
No, there's a whole nother section of skiing. Yeah, for sure.
Right. If you want to be near
Yep.
a ski slope,
Yep.
That may be an increase in price too.
Absolutely.
Because that could be very popular.
Yes. And those places are great because you have more year-round attractiveness. Whereas in the southern end of the mountains, it's going to be more just the summertime activities. Wintertime isn't as popular. Some places, Asheville, popular year-round because it's something so much to do in town. But Boone, Blowing Rock, those areas in the what we call the northern mountains, where they get more snow, definitely year-round. You have hiking in the summer and skiing in the winter.
That's beautiful. You were great. I mean, this
Thanks.
was really fast. This was fabulous.
Yeah, just tip of the iceberg.
I mean, yeah, we just covered a little bit of it. Tell people how they can get a hold of you if they got questions about buying and selling here in the Research Triangle Park area, but also maybe they want to contact you, ask questions about you moving to the mountains.
Absolutely. I'd be glad to help with either one of those. I have a ton of agents up in the mountains that I can refer people to. Got a great network up there of really good folks. So you can contact me directly at scott@lendercraft.com, or you can get me at my number, which is still a mountain number. It's an 828 area code, 828-507-5563.
Repeat that number one more time.
828-507-5563.
Scott, thanks. This has been fun. Thank you for
glad to be here.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's the show. You know what? We talked about the mountains. We talked about buying a house in the mountains if you're going to live there, a little bit on rentals, and also a little bit about a second home. You know what we say here in real estate right now? We're talking about real estate matters that matter to you. We are so glad that you joined us. We know you have a lot of choices. You chose us. So thank you. And we'll be back next week. By the way, it's going to be a special show because it's going to be our Thanksgiving show. We look forward to we'll have that on Tuesday. So join us then. We look forward to seeing you. And as I say to you everywhere, all over the world, ciao, everybody.